Hello. Can everybody see me okay? Is everyone okay? And hear. See and hear. Can I get a thumbs up? Oh, okay. I'm just trying to check and make sure we have everybody. Okay. All right. Welcome. Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And my name is Anjali, and it's such a pleasure to be with you here today. And I'm glad that you're able to join us for this class today. So let's see here. I am going to start my presentation. So just give me a second to do the share. All right. Actually, what am I? Hold on one second. Okay. Fully, I'm going to take that out. All right, I'm doing my best from the technical side, so bear with me. Hopefully everybody can see the slides right now. Can everybody see the slides? Is that a thumbs up? Okay. Great, thank you for that. Thanks, Anastasia. I really appreciate that because I'm not always sure. I checked it last night, but I don't know. Okay. All right, so welcome. So this series that I've been creating is called Compassion, Embracing Grief, Navigating Loss with Kindness, Courage, and Care. And this particular class is offering compassionate care to oneself while one is grieving. So last time we talked, and that I presented, we presented about how to take care of someone else. And there are a lot of similar things that we can do to take care of ourselves if we shift and reverse the focus uh, when we are the one that is grieving. Okay, I don't think this is working. There we go. Okay. So what I'd like to do, and what I usually do in the beginning of my classes, is to have us do a little bit of a grounding exercise. And this is how I start to weave in the tools for how we can learn how to do things to take care of ourselves. And this is just one of those ways. And I have a really long list of tools in the toolbox. So let's start with an embodiment grounding exercise. Embodiment's a very important part of fully inhabiting our experience of grief, but in a mindful way. And for us, whether you're going through something or not right now, this is a way to use a tool to center yourself. So if you'd like, you can take a comfortable seat and close your eyes. Or if you want, you can leave them open, gently looking down at the floor or at an object in your room. So first, take a moment to feel your body and allow yourself to connect to your breath. And then scanning the body, and notice where you feel any physical tension in your body. Wherever you're feeling physical tension most strongly in the body, inhale into that tension and allow the breath to curl around that tension on the in-breath and then release on the out-breath. Do that a few times. Now notice where you might be holding emotional tension in your body. Find where emotional tension is being held in your body most strongly. And then on the in-breath, go down, find that tension, curl around it with the in-breath, and then draw it out of the body with the out-breath. And now scanning the body for any mental tension or worries you might have at this moment, and see where they're more strongly held in your body, those worries and tensions. And then invite the in-breath to curl around that worry and tension, mental tension, and draw it out of the body with the out-breath. And now connect in to an intention today while you are here today. Perhaps for yourself, perhaps for a friend or a relative or a neighbor who's in need right now. Perhaps to prepare yourself for a time when someone in your life may need your help during a life transition, in the future, or when you yourself will need support during a life transition in the future. with awareness, with compassion, with care. Let's allow a moment of tenderness to touch our hearts as we acknowledge the universal human experience of loss and grief, something that we share with all other humans. And let's allow this commonality of our humanity to invite us to open up to a deeper compassion for ourselves and all others. And then let your breath deepen, remaining in your body, feeling your breath and your body as one thing that's moving and dynamic and alive. And then slowly transitioning by opening your eyes. So now I'd like to start with a reading it's one of my favorite passages from Khalil Gibran, who was a wonderful poet and writer from Lebanon. And he wrote a book called The Prophet. And the passage is called On Joy and Sorrow. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else could it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say, joy is greater than sorrow. And others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold, and needs must your joy and sorrow rise or fall. So that was a little bit about this relationship between sorrow and joy, and how really the presence of grief appears in our experience because we have so much love or care for what we've lost. I'd like to talk a little bit about what grief is not before talking a little bit about what grief is. So as I was thinking about what to prepare for this grief education offering, it felt important and actually responsible to not approach this topic of grief with just facts or figures or how-tos or what-to-dos. From my own personal testimony, I can say that grief and the experience of grief is not mechanical. It's not always logical. It's not always pragmatic. It's not a black and white experience. It's not clinical. It's not a pathology. And really, grief is something that should not really be medicalized in the sense that we think there's something wrong with the person or they're sick or we should give them pills because they're grieving. I'm not saying that some people might not need that, but the culture sometimes believes that we should do that. Grief is not an experience that has a set timeline. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And it's a person's birthright to grieve in their own way and in their own time. And there's no cookie cutter map for how to navigate the wilderness of grief, because everybody and every single circumstance of loss is different from every other. Instead, grief is an ever-moving, dynamic, often emotionally unpredictable rite of passage experience. It can be very difficult, frightening, exhausting. It can also be very heart-opening, insightful, and spiritual. And because of the vast scope and range of how a person can live through their experience of grief, it deserves our careful attention, care, love, and compassion. So this bridge you see is a metaphor for bridging between the mental experience that we work through in grief and the physical, emotional experience we have when we grieve. And I felt a strong need to approach the offering today as a heartfelt attempt to bridge the gap between the very strong struggle that most humans endure when trying to make sense, logical sense of a loss in the mind, with the deeply visceral, physical, and emotional experience of being with loss and the grief that accompanies it. And this, I'm hoping, will invite the possibility of how we each can embrace what it means to lean into and live in the gray area of grief in a gentle, moment by moment, compassionate and embodied way. Some of us may be aware of a story when Shakyamuni Buddha was a prince before he went on his journey to find out what the meaning of life was and to solve the problems of suffering in his own heart. When, and I imagine, like him in this particular story, that I too am not the only one here who once lived in a world that was at the time untouched by the idea of death. 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha was a prince, before becoming an awakened being, he lived as a prince in this very protected environment and was kept away from seeing the condition of the world until he one day ventured out from the palace grounds and directly witnessed for himself sickness, aging, and those who were deceased. And this deeply distraught him because this was the first time he became aware of the actual human condition. And then he decided, wow, I need to do something about that. That doesn't make sense. What this is I'm using this as an example to illustrate as a metaphor that there are many cultures in this world that we live in that do not talk openly about death, dying, loss, aging, and grief. In fact, it's often hidden from our mainstream experience. Our elderly are tucked away in nursing homes, mortuaries and graveyards are not places we think to go on a Sunday afternoon. And the grieving and their loss fade into the woodwork after the first month or two. People forget. They don't pay attention that that loss is a forever loss for you. And grief is often also pathologized, meaning we make it a medical problem when it's a natural human experience. Until loss and grief touches us directly in some way, we can remain in the dark about the difficult and unpredictable landscape of this experience. There was another story, the story of Kisha Gotami and the mustard seed. This ancient story in the Buddhist tradition is about a distraught mother named Kisha Gotami, who was guided to seek the help of Lord Buddha in her earnest request to help her resurrect her deceased child, her only beloved child, listen to bring her child's life back. Overcome by total grief, she approached Lord Buddha, who listened compassionately to her and offered to help her. But first, he said she must go to town, venture into town to find a mustard seed from a home that had not been touched by death. And so she went home to home, and as the story goes, she did as she was instructed, and yet returned to the Buddha empty-handed, as there was no such home that had not been touched by death. And from this experience, Kisha Gotami came to the understanding that her sorrow was not hers alone. Loss was universal. So the Buddha had helped her to see the truth of impermanence and make it a reality in the sense that she was not going to be able to bring her child back. So She laid her child to rest, and in time, these awarenesses and teachings helped her find peace and liberation. And I see the moral of this story as something that can guide us into the tender heart of the very real and universal human experience that we all will have at some point, and that death and loss and grief in an experience that will touch us along the way. And so maybe we can connect into this story of Kisa Gautami and find that tenderness in our own heart. So the human condition is fraught with constant change, change that's both unpleasant and pleasant. And as for the unpleasant changes, these experiences can range from a loss of a job, a health challenge, all the way up to the loss of a loved one. We covered quite a few of the different types of losses in the last offering. But you know, when you lose something, it feels like something's missing. Something's no longer there that was there. Something was present that is no longer present. And the quality of change is something that does lead us from experiencing the presence of something in our lives into an experience of the absence of something in our lives. For some of these changes, one's ability to come to understand and accept the absence of what was lost may be much more difficult to metabolize than other kinds of change. More difficult experiences of change and loss often give way to an altered state of reality in which it is hard to believe or accept that what was once present in our lived experience is now permanently absent in a physical way from our lived experience. Such as the absence of a loved one. And the absence of a loved one, I would say, is one of the most difficult losses to navigate such an absence. But there are many ways that we can feel that, and only each individual will really know what that's like for them, because everybody experiences loss differently. One thing we share in common are different aspects or stages of grief that are nonlinear. Many may think that grief is navigated in a linear way. And some of you may have seen this list of things, these different words before as the stages of grief that appear in a linear way. These things you may have heard as the stages of grief: denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. But I arranged them here around grief because the reality is that each person will navigate through the elements of grief in a more organic and dynamic and somewhat unpredictable way. You might bounce between these for a while, maybe thinking that you've come to acceptance and then drop into depression or have anger again or feel some denial. This is very, very normal. And it's important to know and acknowledge about the grief process for both our own grief process as well as when supporting someone else. That there's no right or wrong way that this will go. Your process will be unique to you, and that it's good to honor that and have help for that. So these elements of grief, what are they and how do we recognize them? I'm going over these very briefly, right? I know that we could go into more detail, but just a touch on these is good for us to know. Denial is the disbelief that a loss has happened. This comes with shock sometimes, especially in sudden loss or traumatic loss, but it can happen with other types of losses, like even losing a loved one to a slow battle with cancer. Bargaining is the attempt to try to convince ourselves it is possible to go back to the way things were before the loss, to get back what we lost, to make a deal like the distraught woman with her beloved child who had died didn't want to. She wanted to bargain and get her child back. And it makes perfect sense. Who wouldn't want to pay $1 million, $1 trillion to get their loved one back? Anger arises sometimes with the frustration of what we didn't do or we didn't have control over, or something we should have been able to do. That shouldn't have happened. Why them? And that outcome of loss, we become very angry that it happened at all. It doesn't seem fair that I had to lose this person I loved or this situation. Depression is a feeling of deep sadness or helplessness that we cannot get back what's lost. We kind of realize that that's the case, but I'm not in acceptance of that at all. And it makes me very sad. And I feel helpless. And then acceptance is coming to terms with and accepting the fact that the loss has happened. And there's nothing we can do to change the outcome of that. And in a way, it's a decision that we come to naturally over time to embrace life by embracing the grief and the emotions and the fact that we will be living without what we have lost. So I'm going to share with you one of my intimate stories about loss, and to share with you at this point what I feel makes me even somewhat qualified to share these kinds of things with you, and why I was invited to do these things, to share these things with you. And I wish to speak from my heart and my lived experience, because it has been my personal, direct experience of navigating loss and a long pathway of personal study on the subjects of trauma and grief that helped me navigate my own experiences of trauma and grief. So this is a picture of myself and a man named Michael Drew Leibowitz, who in 2017 uh, was my partner of about a year at that time. And this was taken on Thanksgiving Day. This picture was taken just 3 days before he passed away. And he passed away suddenly in my presence of a heart attack. Nobody saw it coming. We didn't know what was happening when he started to have symptoms. And suddenly, he was gone. And the way I describe my experience about losing this beautiful human being in my life, whom I was very in love with, I wanted to marry. He was a pleasant and beautiful being. And we had just started our life together. And I think it was probably one of the most happy times of my life. I had never anticipated such a shift in my reality. I describe the experience of that loss like a bomb that went off inside of my heart. And for many, many, many months, I fought inside myself just to breathe every day while I lived inside an invisible soul intensive care unit of my own home. And the intensity of that experience of loss was deeply related to my love for him. But I also had experiences that were related to the trauma of the loss that would not allow me to grieve properly for years. I cycled through those 5 elements in a very unpredictable way. And at times, the upheaval of it all and the deep sadness was completely intolerable. So for some people, the shock and trauma of the particular loss can complicate a grief experience, which happened for me. And it made it very difficult to function in daily life. Not everybody will go through something quite like this, but whether or not and how a person goes through what they go through and whom they lose, everybody experiences the loss in a different way. The suddenness of this loss of Michael opened up a lot of unprocessed losses from my childhood and from my life. And that exacerbated and complicated my grief and took me a longer time to recover from. And I experienced a whole list of very challenging symptoms. And they included things like a lack of appetite, depression, anxiety, low energy, not interested in doing things with other people, an inability to go out to public places, be around people. I had difficulty concentrating and making decisions. I had loss of executive function to do just basic everyday activities. And I felt an excruciating loneliness because not only did I lose my partner, but I also had a feeling of being existentially alone in my grief because it was very, very difficult for the people who loved me to be able to fully relate to my experience because they often were not sure what to do to help me. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they were unsure. Maybe they didn't want to hurt me anymore. So they backed off. And so there was a lot of loneliness. And that accompanies grief a lot. So it's important to understand a few factors about the varying experiences that we can have of loss. And we'll cover more of this in part 2. But for now, I just want to share that context of loss matters greatly in how it can affect your overall life. If a person is somebody you've been texting every day saying, hello, sweetie, love you, you eat dinner together, you do everything together, that's going to have a really big impact versus maybe somebody that you're not as intimately connected to. In my case, it was a pretty severe experience of loss, living together and being in partnership. And it also was previous context of my life losses and such that can complicate that experience. So for others, it may be experienced very differently. Secondly, physiological changes to the brain and body. Uh, Everybody goes through this in some way, shape, or form. When you lose a person or you have a significant change in your life where that presence and absence occurs, something that was there is no longer there. This can range from the physiological changes can be range from mild to severe, depending on the context and disposition of the person and of you, right? And then the third thing is we're living a new normal. There's this thing called a new normal. This is how life unfolds for the grieving after someone has, after a change, a big change. You have to live a new normal. And it's what life is like after a loss. Uh, because your experience of day-to-day lived reality without what was part of your life before the loss is gone. And so now you have to chart new territory and live a life without that person, which is what I've had to do for the last 8 years. And this grief, it changes over time with help, with social support, and with a lot of deep inner work. But we can't push it away or make it go away. It takes its own course. There's a no time frame for it. And that person, you will always, always, always love them and probably still feel a little sad throughout your life that they're not around. But the pain, it shifts and it changes and it morphs and it heals and acceptance does come at some point. So grief is an emotion in motion. And when we're experiencing this new normal, which is life after loss, what does this new normal mean? How do we navigate it? I don't want to live in new normal. Like, what is that? But we have to plug in and live into that at some point after perhaps we get through those initial strong rejection of the idea that my life has changed and my environment has changed so dramatically. So there are several ways in which we live into a new normal of living after loss. New normal of living without what was present as a part of our lives on a day-to-day basis. So that presence, absence again. We have the new normal of our experience, of our physiology. As I said before, the body and brain go through changes that grief and loss bring sometimes. And that affects our everyday functioning. So it might mean you have to shift and change and alter how you approach your days until you can get back to the, the day to day in a way that is manageable. Uh, Sometimes we can experience disassociation from our bodies. We don't want to be in our bodies. It's a very real experience to want to get out of the body when we've lost somebody. We go into an in-between place. And it's a way for the mind to cope with loss. It's a way to shut off the intensity of the difficult feelings, maybe even shut down a little bit. But it is so, so important. And I emphasize this from personal experience that it's important to fully embody our grief. We work with the difficult emotions as they arise with deep awareness and allow ourselves to be fluid in accepting the feelings as they arise, not forcing ourselves to simply accept what happened and just push the feelings out, but instead working with mindfulness, with all our tools, with some help perhaps, like a group or a counselor, to help us feel safe and held as we feel those feelings and move through them in our timeline. So, in a sense, accepting what arises without judging it or resisting it, and giving it room at the table, just like we do for every other emotion. Grief lives through us. It transfigures us as we navigate our losses. And it's not a mental illness or pathology, as I said. It is a natural part of our journey. So I think for this class, since we're close to running to the last couple minutes, I'm going to just share this very important piece. If we can think about who would we want in our lives to help us, or if we were to experience a loss, it's so important to establish support. Community and social support is so important for those who've experienced trauma or losses of various kinds. And it's easier to bear grief with some type of good community support. It could be from your school or a spiritual community or even a non-human community like animals. There's empirical research that has shown the need for community support while grieving. And this hopefully will help bring awareness, raise awareness around the importance of funding programs to help people navigating grief in this way. I've had the good fortune of meeting a woman named Dr. Joanne Cacciatore, who owns a care farm, an animal rescue farm very close to here. And she has taken in neglected animals that she rescues. And these animals are much like the humans that come to receive healing from them for their trauma or their neglect when grieving. So family and friends, not all of them will know how to hold space for you. So try to find your trusted marble jar, I call it marble jar friends, the ones that you've established that trust with, and be sure to just surround yourself with at least one or two people that you can talk with deeply about deep things. Because without it, while we're grieving, it can be a very, very big struggle to do that alone. And it's important to have it on the journey. And most people are not trained, they're untrained or uneducated about how to support us. So we forgive them for they know not what to do, right? And instead of most well-meaning family and friends, they want maybe to repair or fix or make it go away or suggest medication even, but the bottom line is no one can fix bringing your loved one back or bringing your old situation back. They can't fix your feelings with stuff or experiences or medication. Although all those things can be nice if they're well received. They just want you to be okay and to maybe come back to your mainstream life, be with them again, the way things were, but you are changed. You are transfigured. We are different after losses. So our family and friends, and sometimes our community may not be in tune with what we actually need. So we might need different people for that kind of support. And that ultimate support is love. It embodies love, compassion, presence, good listening, and small actions to help out is really the most important medicine that's needed for those who are grieving. And for you, as the griever, because this is about how we take care of ourselves, you have a right to draw into your circle who is the most supportive and to honor your own rhythm in your grief process and find your own way with the help that you decide is best for you. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I think yeah, we just went over a little bit. And I just wanted to, I'm gonna click through here because didn't get to all this today, but I wanted to share that if you are grieving now, or you know someone who is, please, please do not hesitate to reach out to Blue Sky Friends. We are here to help you. Sometimes I feel maybe I felt shy. I felt terribly shy. Uh, I wanted people to reach out to me. I was like, I don't want to. And I wish if I could find people, I'd reach out to you if I knew you needed it. But what is so important for ourselves if we're grieving and we really need the help to reach out. Please do. We offer groups for couples, families, communities upon request. So we would do a special group support for you if you reach out to that. And that's the QR code on the left side. And then the QR code on the right side is if you feel like it would be more comfortable for you to connect on an individual way, then that can be scheduled one-on-one as a private appointment, and it will be with me. And we schedule a time that works for your time zone. So follow the QR codes or go to our website to connect to those services if you need them. And they are offered for free. We are a nonprofit. We depend on donations, of course, but anyone is welcome to partake of these services if you don't have that kind of, you don't have to pay. That's why we're a nonprofit, so we can offer you these things to support our international community of friends. That's our mission. So you don't have to grieve alone. That's what we're offering. We're here for you. We also offer prayers for those who are dying and who have died. And you can request those also on the Blue Sky Friends website. And then next week, we'll have another class, and that class, educational class, will be with Ellie Vanderpas, which she teaches classes on the third week of the month, and Gail Deutsch, she teaches the first week of the month, and I do the second. So I'm gonna, it's like, hopefully everyone had a chance to see that and get the information, and I'll stop the share so I can see everybody. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming. And if anybody has a question or anything they'd like to ask, I mean, we can just say goodbye. That's why if you have to get off to work. But I want to leave even a minute for something. If anyone has a question, I'm here to, I can stay. And if you have to go, then go. So thank you all for coming. And if you do have questions that come up, please email us. Email us, chat us in the Telegram chat, direct message us. That's what we're here for. Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah. Nice that you're in town. We'll see you tomorrow, I bet. Yeah, very nice. Okay. Yeah. Mm. Okay, if there's no questions, then I think we'll sign off. Much love to all of you, and we'll see you next time. All right. All right. Much love, everybody. Bye-bye.